My name is Alex. I am 13 years old, and last month my stepdad handed me $5,000 in cash and said, "Happy early birthday. Now you can pay your own way like an adult." "See, you're old enough now," he said with a tight smile, dropping the envelope on my bed. "No more handouts. You want something? Buy it yourself." That's how the real world works, kid. Adult. That was his word, not mine. I stared at the bills fanned across my comforter. $5,000, not a gift, not a celebration, not even a card that said happy birthday. Just cash with strings attached and a new rule. From now on, everything I needed, food, clothes, school supplies, even the roof over my head, I had to pay for myself. "I can handle this," I said out loud to my empty room as if saying it could make it true. But my hands were shaking. There was no budget, no plan, no explanation of how a 13-year-old was supposed to survive on $5,000 while living in a house with two working adults who suddenly decided I wasn't their financial responsibility anymore. I tried to pretend this was some kind of independence test I could pass. Day one, I told myself, I'll prove I can do this. I counted the money 3 times, hid it in my desk drawer, and shoved my confusion down as far as it would go. If my stepdad thought I was old enough to be financially independent, then maybe I'd show him exactly what that looked like. Because as the weeks dragged on, the $5,000 would shrink faster than I could track, the rules would get stranger, and the truth about why he really gave me that money would surface in a way that made my mom whisper, "Oh my God, what have we done?" Do you want to know how being handed $5,000 at 13 turned into the one decision that exposed my stepdad's plan and made my entire family face consequences they never saw coming? Stay to the end, and you'll see exactly how I made sure he could never use money to control me again. The first problem hit me about 2 hours after my stepdad left the envelope on my bed. My mom called me downstairs for dinner, spaghetti with garlic bread, the kind she usually made on Thursdays. I sat down at the table like normal, reaching for the serving spoon. That'll be $8, my stepdad said, not looking up from his plate. I froze. What? Dinner. Your portion costs about $8 with ingredients and utilities. You're paying your own way now. Remember? That's what we agreed on. I didn't agree to anything. Alex, my mom's voice was tight. Your stepdad and I discussed this. You're 13 now, old enough to understand that nothing in life is free. This is a valuable lesson about budgeting. I stared at them, at the spaghetti steaming between us, at the envelope of cash still sitting upstairs like some kind of sick joke. "So I have to pay you to eat dinner in my own house?" "It's called rent and groceries," my stepdad said flatly. "Welcome to adulthood. You can pay now or go hungry. Your choice." My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to throw the plate across the room. Another part wanted to cry. Instead, I stood up, walked back to my room, and pulled $8 from the envelope. When I handed it to him, he smiled. "Good, see? You're learning already." That night, I started a list on my phone. Just like the evidence notebooks I'd read about online, day 1, paid $8 for dinner, balance $4,290. Day 2, I woke up to a note taped to the bathroom mirror. Shower water, electricity, toiletries, $5 daily fee, leave payment in kitchen jar. I read it 3 times, certain it was a joke. It wasn't. At breakfast, which I skipped because I couldn't afford another $8, my stepdad explained the new system like he was teaching a business class. "You have $5,000, that should last you about 4 months if you're smart. Food, rent, utilities, school supplies, clothes, it all comes out of your budget. When it's gone, you'll need to figure out how to earn more. Maybe get a job, mow lawns, babysit. That's what I did at your age. I'm 13. I can't legally work most places." "Then you'll get creative. That's what adults do." My mom sat at the table, stirring her coffee, saying nothing. When I looked at her, she glanced away. Mom, you're okay with this?" "Your stepdad thinks it's important you learn responsibility," she said quietly. "We both work hard. We need you to contribute." "I'm 13. I'm still in middle school. I can't." "You can," my stepdad interrupted. "Or you can choose not to and face the consequences. No payment means no services. That's how the world works, Alex. I'm doing you a favor by teaching you now instead of letting you figure it out the hard way later. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went back to my room and updated my list. Day 2, $5 for bathroom access, $8 for dinner last night. Total spent $13, balance $4,037. By day 5, I'd spent $73 on basic survival. In a house where I'd lived my entire life without ever being charged rent. I started skipping meals to save money. I showered every other day instead of daily. I wore the same clothes twice before washing them because laundry cost $3 per load. My stepdad noticed. See? You're budgeting. I'm proud of you. My mom said nothing. On day 7, I was sitting in my room calculating how long the money would actually last, maybe 10 weeks if I cut everything to the bare minimum, when my phone buzzed, text from my best friend Jordan. Dude, why weren't you at school today? I stared at the message. I hadn't been at school because I couldn't afford the $4 transportation and facility fee my stepdad had started charging me to live in a house within walking distance of the school. I didn't know how to explain that, so I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my notes app and started recording everything. Not just the money, the rules. The way my stepdad watched me count bills with this satisfied smile, the way my mom avoided eye contact, and then I did something I'd learned from every revenge story I'd ever read online. I started researching child labor laws and parental financial responsibility, what counts as neglect in my state. Turns out, parents can't just stop feeding their kids and call it financial independence training. Turns out, charging a minor rent and utilities might actually be illegal depending on how it's structured. And turns out, I wasn't as powerless as my stepdad thought. On day 10, I was down to $4,143 after paying for 2 weeks of basic existence. My stomach ached from hunger. My clothes smelled because I was rationing laundry. I'd stopped going to school because I couldn't afford the daily fees. That's when someone knocked on the door. I was alone, my mom and stepdad both at work, so I cracked it open carefully. Standing on the porch was Ms. Rivera, my school counselor. Hi, Alex, she said gently. You've missed 4 days of school. Nobody could reach your parents. I wanted to check on you personally. Can I come in? For a second, I thought about saying I was fine, that everything was normal, that I'd just been sick. But then I looked down at my clothes, the same shirt I'd worn for 3 days, and felt the hollow ache in my stomach from skipping breakfast and lunch to save $16. And I stepped back and let her inside. Sure, I said quietly, but you're going to want to sit down for this. If you were 13 and watching every dollar disappear while your parents called it a life lesson, would you stay silent and survive? Or would you do what I did and let the truth become the weapon they never saw coming? Ms. Rivera sat at our kitchen table, the same table where I'd been charged $8 for spaghetti 10 days ago. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, the jar on the counter labeled Alex's payments, the handwritten fee schedule taped to the refrigerator, the receipt spike where my stepdad kept records of every transaction. Yeah, walk me through a typical day, she said, carefully pulling out a notebook. So I did. I told her about the envelope, the $5,000, the fees for everything, the food I couldn't afford, the showers I skipped, the school days I missed because I couldn't pay the transportation charge. Transportation charge? She repeated. You live 4 blocks from school. I know. But my stepdad said if I'm living in his house, I have to pay for the privilege of accessing the neighborhood, including the route to school. Yeah, her pen stopped moving. Alex, that's not legal. Parents are required to provide access to education. He said I'm old enough to pay my own way now, so that I need to learn how the real world works. You're 13. He says that's old enough. Ms. Rivera's jaw tightened. She stood up and walked to the refrigerator, reading the fee schedule out loud. Breakfast, $6. Lunch, $8. Dinner, $8. Daily utilities, $5. Laundry per load, $3. Internet access, $4 per day. Bedroom rent, $200 per month. She turned to me. Alex, how much of the $5,000 is left? I pulled out my phone and showed her my tracking list. After 10 days, $4,343. You've spent $250 in 10 days on basic necessities in your own home. My stepdad's home. I corrected quietly. He reminds me of that a lot. Ms. Rivera took photos of everything, the fee schedule, the payment jar, the receipt spike. Then she turned to me with an expression I'd never seen on a teacher's face before. Pure contained fury. Alex, what your stepdad is doing is called financial abuse. It's a form of child neglect. You're a minor. Your parents are legally obligated to provide food, shelter, and access to education without charging you. This isn't a life lesson. This is illegal. The words hit me like cold water. Illegal. Not just mean, not just unfair. Illegal. So what happens now? I asked. Now I call Child Protective Services, and we document everything. Joyce, she made the call right there at my kitchen table. I heard fragments of her conversation. 13 years old. Systematic financial exploitation. Missed school due to inability to pay fabricated fees. Evidence in the home. When she hung up, she looked at me. Someone will be here within 2 hours. Until then, I'm staying with you. You're not going to be alone when they arrive. My stepdad gets home at 5:30. Good. They'll want to talk to him. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Ms. Rivera asked, "Do you have any other documentation? Texts, recordings, anything?" I showed her my phone, the daily log, the photos I'd taken of the fee schedule when it first appeared, the screenshots of text conversations with my mom where I'd asked if this was really happening and she'd responded, "Your stepdad knows what's best. Just cooperate." "This is thorough," Ms. Rivera said. "It's like you knew you'd need evidence." I read a lot of stories online, I admitted, about kids who had to prove what was happening to them. I didn't want anyone to be able to say I was lying or exaggerating. Smart! Sad that you had to be that smart, but smart. At 3:47 p.m., a silver sedan pulled into our driveway. A woman in business casual clothing got out, carrying a leather folder. Ms. Rivera opened the door before she could knock. "I'm the school counselor who called. This is Alex." The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson from Child Protective Services. She had kind eyes and a voice that didn't talk down to me. "Alex, I need to ask you some questions, and I need to see the evidence your counselor mentioned. Is that okay?" "Yes," I said. "I want you to see everything." We went through it all again. The envelope, the fees, the tracking list, the missed meals, the skipped showers, the days I couldn't go to school. Mrs. Patterson took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she asked, "Where's the money now?" "In my desk drawer, in my room. What's left of it." "Can you show me?" I led her upstairs, pulled out the envelope, counted out 4,640 in front of her. She photographed the money. Then she asked, "Has your stepdad explained why he's doing this?" "He says I'm old, enough to be financially independent, that I need to learn how to budget, that he's teaching me about the real world. By charging you rent and utilities at 13. He says it's preparation for adulthood." Mrs. Patterson closed her notebook. "Alex, I want you to understand something. What your stepdad is doing isn't preparation, it's exploitation. Parents don't get to stop feeding their children and call it education. That's not how the law works." "So what happens now?" "I'm going to wait here until your parents get home. I need to speak with them directly. Depending on that conversation, we may need to make immediate safety arrangements." "Safety arrangements?" "Making sure you're in an environment where you're not being financially exploited or neglected." My heart hammered. "You mean like taking me away?" Possibly, temporarily, until we can assess whether this home is safe for you." Part of me was terrified. Another part, the part that had been counting dollars just to eat dinner, felt relief so sharp it almost hurt. My stepdad got home at 5:33 p.m., exactly when he always did. I heard his car in the driveway, the door slam, his keys in the lock. He walked into the kitchen and stopped dead when he saw 3 adults sitting at his table. "What's going on?" His voice was controlled, but I saw his jaw tighten. Mrs. Patterson stood. "Mr. Harper, I'm from Child Protective Services. We need to discuss your financial arrangement with Alex." "Financial arrangement?" He set his briefcase down carefully. "I'm teaching my stepson about money management. There's nothing wrong with that. You're charging him rent, utilities, and food costs. He's 13. He's old enough to start learning responsibility. He's a minor. You're legally obligated to provide food, shelter, and access to education. You can't charge him for basic necessities. Andalio, my stepdad's face flushed. I gave him $5,000. That's more than generous. Most kids don't get anything. You gave him $5,000 and then charged him to live in his own home. In 10 days, he spent $257 just to survive. He's missed 4 days of school because he couldn't afford your fabricated transportation fee. That's not financial education, that's neglect. Neglect? I'm teaching him? You're exploiting him. Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through his protests. I have documentation, fees posted on your refrigerator, a payment jar, receipts, text messages, Alex's own detailed records of every transaction. This isn't borderline. This is clear-cut financial abuse. My stepdad looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in days. You've been documenting this? You've been building a case against me? I've been trying to survive, I said quietly. You told me to be an adult. Adults keep records. His face went from red to pale. This is insane. You're turning my parenting into a crime. Your parenting is a crime, Ms. Rivera said, speaking for the first time. I've been a school counselor for 15 years. I've seen neglect in many forms. This is one of the most calculated versions I've encountered. The front door opened again. My mom, home from her shift at the hospital. She walked into the kitchen and froze, taking in the scene. The CPS caseworker, the school counselor, me sitting in the corner, my stepdad standing rigid by the counter. What's happening? She asked. Mrs. Harper, Mrs. Patterson said, we're investigating allegations of child neglect and financial abuse. I need to ask you some questions. Financial abuse? What are you talking about? Did you know your husband was charging Alex for food, utilities, and rent? My mom's eyes darted to my stepdad. We discussed teaching him budgeting. Did you know he missed 4 days of school because he couldn't afford the fees your husband was charging? Just silence. Mrs. Harper, did you know your 13-year-old son was skipping meals because he couldn't pay for them? He has $5,000, which he's been forced to spend on survival. In 10 days, he's down to $4,643. At this rate, the money will last about 10 weeks. Then what? What was your plan when the money ran out? My mom looked at me. For the first time, really looked at me. At the same clothes I'd been wearing for 3 days, at how thin my face had gotten, at the way I was sitting, small, hunched, trying to disappear. Oh my God, she whispered. Alex, I didn't realize. You didn't ask, I said. You just let him do it. Mrs. Patterson opened her folder. Based on my initial assessment, I'm recommending immediate temporary removal. Alex will be placed with emergency foster care until a full investigation can be completed. You can't take my son. My mom's voice cracked. I can, and I am. He's being financially exploited in this home. He's missing school. He's malnourished. That's enough for emergency intervention. My stepdad finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. This is because the kid couldn't handle a little responsibility. He's manipulating you. He's always been dramatic. I have receipts, I said quietly. Every payment, every fee, every day I went hungry, every day I couldn't afford to shower. I documented all of it. You taught me that evidence matters, so I collected evidence. The room went silent. Mrs. Patterson turned to me. Alex, go pack a bag. Just clothes and personal items for a few days. Ms. Rivera will help you. As I stood up, my stepdad said, if you leave with them, don't bother coming back. Mr. Harper, Mrs. Patterson said coldly, that sounds like a threat. I'd advise you to stop talking. Upstairs, packing my bag, Ms. Rivera stood in the doorway. You okay? She asked. I don't know. Part of me feels like I just destroyed my family. You didn't destroy anything. They did that when they decided to treat their child like a tenant. I folded clothes into my backpack. Where will I go? Foster care temporarily. The Caseworker will find a safe placement. It won't be forever, just until they determine whether your home can be made safe or if alternative arrangements need to be permanent. What happens to them? Investigation, interviews, possibly charges, definitely mandatory parenting classes and psychological evaluation if they want you back. I zipped my bag closed, looked around my room, the desk where I'd hidden the money, the bed where the envelope had been dropped, the corner where I'd sat crying after realizing I couldn't afford dinner. I don't think I want to come back, I said. That's okay too. You get to have a say in what happens next. We walked back downstairs. My mom was crying at the kitchen table. My stepdad was on his phone, presumably calling a lawyer. Mrs. Patterson stood by the door with another woman I hadn't seen arrive, a foster placement coordinator. Alex, this is Ms. Chen. She's going to take you to a temporary home where you'll be safe, fed, and supported. You'll continue going to school. We'll check in with you every few days. Can I take my phone? Yes. And the money. That's legally yours. He can't touch it. I grabbed the envelope from my desk drawer one last time. $4,243 that had been supposed to last me 4 months of childhood. As we walked toward the door, my mom stood. Alex, please, we can fix this. Your stepdad he just wanted you to learn. He wanted me to fail, I said. He set it up so I'd run out of money and have to beg. That's not teaching. That's control. That's not true. Mom, I have 10 days of records proving it's true. And when they investigate, they're going to find more. Mrs. Patterson touched my shoulder gently. Let's go. I walked out the front door without looking back. The foster home was nothing like I expected. Ms. Chen drove me to a quiet neighborhood and pulled up to a normal-looking house with a swing set in the yard. A couple in their 50s came out to greet us, Mr. and Mrs. Okoye. Alex, welcome, Mrs. Okoye said warmly. We're going to make sure you're comfortable and safe here. Inside, they showed me a small bedroom with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto a garden. This is yours for as long as you need it, Mr. Okoye said. Dinner is at 6:30, breakfast at 7-9. You don't pay for anything here, you just exist, like a kid should. That night, sitting at their dinner table, I watched them serve food without asking for payment. I used the bathroom without calculating utility costs. I took a shower without counting dollars, and for the first time in 10 days, I cried. Not from fear, from relief. Mrs. Okoye sat next to me and didn't ask questions, just put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're safe now." The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, I lived with the Okoyes. Went back to school, saw a therapist twice a week, gave multiple statements to CPS investigators. They interviewed my mom and stepdad separately. Reviewed all my documentation, my tracking list, photos, texts. They interviewed my teachers, neighbors, even Jordan and his parents. And then they found something I hadn't known about. During a financial audit, standard procedure in exploitation cases, they discovered that my stepdad had been depositing my payments into a separate account. The $257 I'd paid him over 10 days, he'd kept it. But more than that, the $5,000 he'd given me was supposed to be from my college fund. Money my biological father had left me before he died when I was 6. My stepdad had taken money from my inheritance, given me access to it under fraudulent pretenses, then systematically collected it back through fake fees while planning to pocket the difference. It wasn't a financial lesson. It was theft. When Mrs. Patterson told me this during one of our check-ins, I felt my whole body go cold. He stole from me, I said. The whole time, he was just stealing from me. Yes. And that changes the charges significantly. This isn't just neglect anymore. It's financial exploitation of a minor and theft from a protected trust. What happens now? Criminal charges. The DA is building a case. Your stepdad will be arrested. Your mom, depending on her level of knowledge and participation, may face charges as well. I don't want my mom to go to jail. That's not your decision to make, and it's not your burden to carry. The adults made choices. Now, they face consequences. The court hearing was 3 months after I'd been removed from the home. I sat in a room that smelled like old wood and anxiety while lawyers argued about financial abuse, parental rights, and criminal intent. My stepdad sat at the defendant's table in a suit that probably cost more than the $257 he'd stolen from me. My mom sat in the gallery looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I was called to testify. The prosecutor asked me to walk through everything: the envelope, the fees, the hunger, the tracking, the documentation. My stepdad's lawyer tried to make it sound like I'd been defiant, ungrateful, manipulative. Isn't it true you've always had a difficult relationship with your stepfather? He made it difficult, I replied. Isn't it true you were looking for a reason to cause problems in your family? No, I was looking for a way to survive in my family. The evidence spoke louder than any cross-examination. The photos, the receipts, the tracking list, the bank records showing deposits from my payments, the trust fund documents proving the $5,000 was mine to begin with. The judge's ruling came down swift and clear. My stepdad was found guilty of financial exploitation of a minor, theft from a protected trust, and child neglect. Sentenced to 2 years in prison, 5 years probation, and permanent loss of custody or guardianship rights over me. My mom was found complicit, but not criminally charged. She was ordered to complete parenting classes, undergo psychological evaluation, and could only have supervised visitation with me. The $5,000, what remained of it, plus the $257 my stepdad had stolen, was returned to my trust fund, untouchable until I turned 18. And I was given a choice: return to my mom's custody under supervision or pursue permanent placement elsewhere. I chose elsewhere. It's been 8 months since my stepdad handed me that envelope and called it a birthday gift. I'm 14 now. Still living with the Okoyes, who started the process to become my permanent foster family. Maybe adoption, if I want it. I'm still deciding. I go to therapy every week, work through the complicated feelings about watching my family implode because I refuse to stay silent. My mom sends letters, long ones, full of apologies and explanations and promises that she didn't know how bad it was, that she should have protected me, that she's working on herself. I read them. Sometimes I respond. We have supervised visits once a month. It's awkward and painful, and I don't know if we'll ever be okay. But I know this: she made choices. She chose her husband over her son. She chose to look away when I was hungry. She chose to let me be exploited because it was easier than confronting him. Those were her choices. The consequences are hers to carry. My stepdad writes me too, from prison. Letters full of anger and blame, how I ruined his life, how I'm a vindictive, ungrateful child, how he was only trying to teach me. I don't read those anymore. Ms. Rivera taught me I don't have to. Last week was my actual 14th birthday. The Okoyes made me a cake. We ate dinner together. No fees, no payments, no transactions. Just food and family and the weird, unfamiliar feeling of being cared for without conditions. Make a wish, Mrs. Okoye said, lighting the candles. Silikathim, I closed my eyes. Thought about the girl I'd been 8 months ago, counting dollars, skipping meals, documenting abuse because I knew no one would believe me without proof. I wish that girl could see me now. Safe. Fed. Free. When I opened my eyes, Mr. Okoye was holding out an envelope. My whole body tensed. It's not what you think, he said gently. Open it. Inside was a birthday card, hand-drawn by Mrs. Okoye, and tucked inside a receipt for a college savings account they'd opened in my name. Starting balance, $500. It's yours, Mrs. Okoye said. No strings, no fees, no payments required. Just a gift, because you deserve to have dreams that don't cost you your childhood. I cried, again, still learning that tears can come from relief and not just fear. Thank you, I whispered. Happy birthday, Alex, Mr. Okoye said. You're safe now, and you're going to stay that way. If someone had told me a year ago that my 13th birthday would start with $5,000 and end with me in foster care, I wouldn't have believed them. if someone had said that the worst thing my stepdad ever did would also be the thing that finally set me free, would have laughed. But here I am, 14, safe, building a life where food doesn't cost me anything except the time it takes to eat it. My stepdad thought he was teaching me about the real world. What he actually taught me was this: adults don't always protect you. Sometimes you have to protect yourself. And the best protection is truth. Documented, recorded, impossible to deny. He gave me $5,000 and thought he was teaching me to be an adult. Instead, I taught him that even kids know how to collect evidence. Even kids know how to fight back. Even kids know when they're being abused, and some of us are brave enough to make sure the world knows it too. So tell me, if you were 13 and handed money with strings attached, would you take it and stay silent? Or would you do what I did and turn every receipt, every record, every hungry night into proof that could change everything? The choice was mine. The consequences were his. And I'd make the same choice again, every single time.